We have planted the seeds and watered the Spring Football Talk Show garden with yet another edition of Spring Football Has Sprung. Eugene Oba with you. Glad to see you. Glad to be here on this, the season finale, the first season finale of Spring Football Has Sprung. My, how time flies when you are having fun. And boy, we have had a lot of fun producing this program. And I want to thank everybody on behalf of the Common Sense Entertainment team for supporting us throughout this time. And what a lot of support for a lot of these guys. If you look at some of these signings, especially Taylor Brown, look at that. He's heading to the Saints. You love to see that. And you also love to see the kind words from Sean Payton, head coach of the Denver Broncos, about the developments of players in this league. And the United Bowl was a lot of fun. Maybe not so fun for those of us out here in the DMV, but a lot of fun for the Kings. And we're going to talk about that and what the future may hold for Louisville and why the United Bowl was really, really terrific. Also going to talk about which teams are truly ready for investment. We're going to revisit that segment that we did weeks ago. I'm going to update that with maybe a few additions and subtractions. So definitely check that out. And then Jesse Karengu, he is a content creator, somebody who's done sports for quite a bit. So he's going to join us, talk about the Defenders a little bit, talk about the attendance over there in that market. He also is going to have a very interesting perspective about where the UFL should fall in the sports calendar. A lot of you talk about wanting to move up the season to after the Super Bowl. Maybe this should stay the same. You'll want to hear Jesse's take on that and a few other things. And if that's not enough, folks, for this supersized season finale of the show, we're going to also bring back the report card. I did an interim progress report weeks ago. Now we're going to do the final report card for the third season of the United Football League. Who do I think has made the grade? Any improvements? We'll check that out. I'll don my professor hat for a little bit. And then John Lewis, you guys, I've never had anybody who has really been more popular among the viewing public than John Lewis of John Lewis Sports. He joins us. We're going to have a good conversation about Louisville, talk about the league, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the storylines heading into next year. So what a great conversation there. And of course, we are going to close out with some unsolicited advice that I will provide for this league. So Mike Rapoli, I hope that you will be watching. And as we kick off this final episode of the first season of Spring Football Has Sprung, what a great, great time I know for Chris Redman as the head coach of the Louisville Kings. And pretty much that was reflected, after the win in this statement in the presser.
For us to get an opportunity to play for a championship and then win is amazing. I mean, where we came from, obviously, and everybody knows the story, but it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And these guys have a lifelong lesson that no matter what happens in life, you can fight back. And I learned that from my son. I learned that from a lot of different things in this life. And I'm just so happy that we finished it. I get to take a trophy back to my hometown. So just really proud of these guys. We didn't play our best in the first half. Second half, defense played really well in the first half, and then we found some things that we could get done against an incredible football team. And give Shannon and the DC Defenders a lot of credit. And they played a hard fought battle. And they're a great team, well coached. They're a championship caliber, and it took all we had to get the win today. So give him a lot of credit and give these guys. Ian had an amazing game, and Chandler, he always plays an amazing game, and just really happy for these guys to be able to finish off an incredible season. I'm just so proud.
It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Took the words right out of my mouth, Coach Redman. And you could also apply that saying to the Knicks in the finals of the NBA. Congrats to them. But on this show, congrats to the Kings What a phenomenal achievement in front of a sellout crowd in our nation's capital in Audi Field. Real great energy on the day. Incredible stuff, especially from a rookie coach, Chris Redmond. I think he should have been named Coach of the Year over Anthony Beck. So when you look at the body of work that the Kings did from where they were near the bottom to getting to the top, it was just incredible to see. And the last few games of Louisville were so fun to watch. Um, Once Bean went down, Jason Bean went down in the game, it was pretty much game over for DC, but still DC has a lot to be proud of throughout this year, all things considered. You hope that Talamu comes back healthy and in really ready to go in this. Definitely, I think for this league, Louisville, they are the model student of this league. They really are. This would be Dean's List in terms of the fan support, the engagement. I saw a picture somewhere. One of the bridges was lit up green for the Kings. 6,000 season tickets already accounted for. Major sponsors lined up for Louisville. A lot of businesses clamoring for this. And what it shows is the passion. When you have real passionate markets, and especially those that, again, initially weren't exactly winning, and then you start to pick up in terms of the wins, and you're still supporting, even with all the controversy about the overtime, that sort of thing. And we kind of sort of thought that maybe this would derail the buy-in from the Louisville market. I think it's impressive. I talked with some of their fans outside of Audi Field, and the excitement that they have for this win and really for their team is just something to be admired. And I've been very bullish on this. I predicted this. I said that this was going to be a breakout market, that this of the teams in this league, especially the newer teams, that this was going to be the breakout market. This was going to be a hit, and this is a bona fide hit. Louisville, bona fide hit for the league. And I have been so bullish on this that we are going to be going. I made my mind up about this. We are going to go to Louisville and do a show next year. Next season when we do this, provided that there is a UFL next season, which all indications seem that there will be, we are going to do the show in Louisville. So very, very excited about that. And I think that there is a case to be made, folks, that Louisville should be the host of the next United Bowl, United Bowl 2, or maybe maybe 4, as the case may be, whatever it is. So um maybe there should be a rule that the winner of the United Bowl should be the host of this. I don't know. Mike Rapoli, if you're watching, maybe consider that. But Louisville would be a very deserving market to host the United Bowl, and you're going to have the support of this. You really are. 50 Cent, in person anyway, I thought the performance was great. The fan activations were really, really, really nice. Credit to Rapoli for doing such a good job with the details with the United Bowl. He gets it. Details do matter. The gold cups, the giveaways, the fan activations. They were giving away some of the junkless protein bars or whatever they are. Really, really great. Um, you had a band that was outside. I mean, it's the little things. These are little things, but it's the little things that do matter, that add to the overall experience. It's lovely to see. But what wasn't so lovely was that Audi did run out of ice towards the end of the game. So Audi, we got to be a little careful about that, especially on as hot as it was outside, although at least it wasn't humid. So that was good. But small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. The sellout crowd was great. This really takes the wind out of the sails of the NFL snobs and the CFL snobs. And you love to see that. People complain about crowd when it comes to some of this stuff, all the haters out there. But definitely, you cannot say that there was no crowd out there. I mean, the last two championships, a little sparse. I mean, still okay, but a little sparse. DC, great crowd. Great crowd. Yes, having DC in there helped, but and maybe also 50 Cent as well. There was some rumbling that maybe on TV it did not translate well, 50 Cent's performance, but overall, really great day. Um, and I think it was a great look for the league. And it's the first league, by the way. I'll point out that it's the first league since the 80s USFL, first domestic spring league of its type to actually advance, complete the third season, and hopefully advance then to a fourth season. And once that happens, provided that there's no crazy stuff that goes on, especially with the upcoming negotiation for the CBA and that sort of thing, then I think it is a watershed moment for the sports ecosystem for the UFL to head to a fourth season. But completing 3 seasons, which hasn't been done, consecutive seasons that haven't been done since the original USFL in the 80s, I think that that is really a big deal. And I think that the league should definitely, if they haven't already, they should celebrate that. And I think fans of the league should really celebrate this as well. So again, nice job with the United Bowl. Real good stuff there. I now want to revisit something that I talked about previously on this show, and I wanted to talk about the teams now. Now that the UFL's third season is over, I want to revisit the teams that I believe are ready for investment. We had a chart up about this, and of the teams that I believe now are ready for investment, I said initially that only DC and St. Louis are ready to have outside investment. And when we talk about investment, what I mean by that is that the end game for a league like this, really, the end game is that you want to have outside investors. They want to be able to parcel these off as franchises. I mean, if the Oklahoma reporting in PBS a few weeks back was anything to go by, that is going to have an ownership group. And this was 2 years in the making. So I've always said this, when you have people who are able to see around corners like Mike Rapoli, then there is a lot of opportunity. You can have a lot of good things here. So the teams that I believe now, in addition to DC and St. Louis, that are ready for investment, I'm going to upgrade 2 teams from the list. Louisville, I believe, yes, it's only been a year, but they are definitely ready for outside investment. Do not be surprised if the Lynn family decide to have ownership of the Kings. You know, maybe in an MLS owner operator type model, but I think Louisville, with their strong fan support throughout, even in the ups and downs, the engagement, their attendance never dipped below 10,000. Never dipped below 10,000. You have a very passionate market. You know, you got Chris Redmond doing a great job, you know, especially as a rookie coach. Um, and the team is really, really great. And the fans love this stuff. So Louisville definitely, I would say, is ready for investment. The other team that I think is ready for investment, Orlando. Now, initially, Orlando, a little bit of touch and go in terms of some aspects of the attendance, especially those seats in the front there that are close to the field. But I think Anthony Becht, who I think I've mentioned this, he's a strong advocate for this league. He really knows how to promote the league. This is Rapoli's team. I think there is real potential in Orlando. Remember, they are once bitten, 7 times shy. 7 teams, non-NFL teams of a comparable nature, have come and gone. I don't think that the Storm are going to be the 8th team. The support in Daytona for that for the semifinal and this was with very limited notice, I was very, very impressed by. There were other people that were not impressed, mainly a certain writer over in San Antonio. But this was, for me, really, really impressive that they pulled off what they pulled off in Daytona Beach. So I like Orlando as a market. I think there's a lot of potential there. You have to nurture that. But I do think now, really, they are ready to have a real investment in this league. Now, I have teams that still are in the maybe column for investment. Columbus, Dallas, and Houston. Now, Columbus, it's a little early. I see long-term potential if Michigan comes back. Now, you saw probably the reporting that the soccer stadium there is going to be delayed another year. It's not going to be opened until 2028, and I think that really precludes the Panthers, at least for now, unless they were to open that in January of 2028, maybe. Um, but I think that for now, it precludes Michigan from coming back to the league, at least for 2028. But once that does become added, and I think it will be, just not in 2028, but once that happens, then you lean into that rivalry with Ohio State, Michigan, that sort of thing. That is going to really bring a lot of attention to viewers. And I think with the attendance, Columbus's attendance was actually very solid. So I think that it stands to really gain even more. And that stadium, very, very good stadium. Dallas, the move to Frisco, um, I don't think that was good. I think it was probably better optics maybe, but I think that there's a case to move that back to Choctaw. There was consistent attendance in Choctaw, like around a little over 9,000. But Dallas and Houston, which Houston's been jerked around many times in this, I need to see more. I need to see more. I think stability is going to be key in that market in terms of investment. Now, the league is headquartered in Arlington. I don't think that the Texas teams are going to go away at any point, but there's some work I think that has to be done before I think you involve outside investors. And really, I think there has to be a lot of consistency in Houston because, from Roughnecks to the Gamblers and then all of the stadiums, TDECU, Rice, that sort of thing. You just need to foster some level of stability in that. And then the team that's still not ready for investment, Birmingham, they're the cousin Oliver of this league. Lowest retention, lowest median household income. I don't see the upside really there for an investor. I don't. And again, this is not to be a snob, but this is a business at the end of the day. This is not a charity. Um, I just don't see this stuff happening for Birmingham. And there were some interesting comments in the ESPN article from Kevin Seifert. He said that there is an 80% chance that all 8 markets are going to be retained for next year, and that they're going to do a market by market analysis of all of this stuff. We're going to have that at the end of the show. So Mike, and all these guys, if you guys are watching Spring Football Has Sprung, I'm going to do that for you for free. So definitely stick around to the end for that. So if you take that quote and then you combine that with the fact that some of these markets that are being bandied about for this, especially Boise, Idaho. We've talked about Boise in this, Raleigh, Charleston, New England, but especially the fact that Boise is mentioned. And this is the first time that Boise has been mentioned under Mike Ripoli's ownership. Remember that the talks about Boise as a team for this league, as a city for this league, predated Mike Ripoli's involvement in this. So when I combine those things, it's kind of like that NSYNC song, Bye, Bye, Bye. I think it's Bye, Bye, Birmingham honestly, in this. I'll spare you my singing for this, but I do think that the lyrics from that NSYNC song back in the day fit Birmingham's plight, which state, quote, when you weren't there for me, so now it's time to leave and make it alone. I know that I can't take no more. It ain't no lie. I want to see you out that door, baby. Bye, bye, bye. So I think that Mike Rapoli is probably singing that right now in his mansion. Um Honestly, guys, I think that the coffin has already been selected at this point. It really is. I think he's got an itchy finger. He may not do that stuff until 2028, but I said in the last show or the show before this that I wouldn't surprise me if there were changes made next year in this. So this is something, in my opinion, to keep an eye on. It's really something right here. And what's so clear to me now in looking at this is that Daryl Johnston, who I've kind of hammered him on this show, but it is so clear to me now when I think about this league and I think about what has been happening this year, is that really he is the one. There was a question: was he the person that really held the UFL back from greater success? And I think attendance declines notwithstanding, I think when you look at the overall energy of the United Bowl, when you look at the overall energy of the league, when you look at the fact that the TV ratings are up, I think that the common denominator to all of this is that really Daryl Johnston, when you eliminated him, a lot of things, not everything, but a lot of things got a lot better in this. So I think him being canned from the league was long overdue. And we are starting to see the benefits. And again, you start to wonder if he was not involved in the merger, would this league be further along? And I think there's a case to be made that the answer to that will be yes. I think Rapoli has done more in less than a year being involved in this league than all these other people have done for a longer time. So let's see where this goes. I think the two biggest things: collective bargaining agreement, that's going to be a big thing. The first negotiation under Rapoli's ownership, and then Birmingham's future. Again, this is a business, not a charity. Jesse Corregu. Jesse Corregu, he's a content creator and he's a sports media writer and contributor. Jesse, welcome to Spring Football Has Sprung, our season finale. Glad to have you here. It is being just shy of a week now since the United Bowl has been completed. The Defenders sadly lost. You've covered a lot of sports here in the DMV over the years. What has been your reaction to the United Bowl in spite of the Defenders loss here, not getting the second year in a row insofar as the championship?
So what I would say is, first of all, shout out to the UFL for choosing DC as the destination. I know attendance has reduced since the last couple of seasons and since the leagues began, but in general, this is still a super supportive spring football city, and you saw it on Saturday afternoon with the United Bowl here in DC. First of all, tickets were super affordable. I was at work on Friday night and I was like, you know what? I haven't been to a UFL game yet. Let me try it out, especially when it's championship weekend. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. But one thing that I loved is that the UFL has kept its promise of being an accessible league. Tickets were only $32 at the least. There were a bunch of other tickets that were definitely more expensive, more upscale, depending on where you wanted to sit. But again, the UFL, one of its biggest promises when it started, and even when they were separated into two different leagues, was that they were going to be a league for the masses. They were going to provide a solution to the football hangover that we have as fans after the Super Bowl is over. And so they're living up to it. The tickets were accessible, and clearly folks showed up. They pulled up, and it helped that the defenders were in the championship as well. The beer, what do they call it?
Beer snake.
The beer snake. It was the longest I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Um,
The
I
gold
love
cups were
gold
great.
cups. The gold cups looked awesome. They looked beautiful on TV. And you could tell that this is a fan base that is active and is ready to see championship football. And hopefully that translates to the Commanders. I mean, I'm a Ravens fan, so I really hope not. But for the city and for that fan base, they deserve it. But that's my first takeaway, is that it's accessible and that people love it. People seem to enjoy it, and people seem to really be tagging along with it. Even though they don't really know the names of the players, and the players switch up every year. The coaches could switch up every year, but they love that the league is aligning with their city, and it aligns with their values, and it aligns with what this city is. At the end of the day, America looks at DC as a dividing city, but if you actually live here, if you actually live in the city, it's a city of many different cultures, many different vibes that unites together and loves to do things together as one and as a community. And the Defenders are a great example of that. The other thing that I loved is the halftime show. The halftime show was awesome. We had a recognizable face in 50 Cent. Now, honestly, I think he was lip syncing. I don't think he was actually rapping, which kind of bothered me. And if you were watching on TV, you saw that the feedback was kind of off between what he was saying and what we were hearing. The DJs were kind of confused as well. The co-MCs with him were kind of confused as well. But the fans were into it. And the UFL did a great job of inviting all of the DC socialites, DC content creators that go viral in the area, because they were all in the front row, tweeting and taking videos of the performance and amplifying the sport, and making sure people are aware of the team. And the Defenders lost, but they still had great support and great enthusiasm, and there's a lot of great momentum going into next season.
Yeah, I think that, speaking of the 50 Cent concert, I was there for the United Bowl, and I got feedback from some of other friends of mine that it did not translate well on TV. In person, it was great, I thought.
I
In
can
person,
imagine.
it was great.
On the Instagram videos, it looked awesome. It looked amazing.
Mhm.
It looked like everybody was rowdy. The weather was perfect. It wasn't too hot, wasn't too humid. But on television, it didn't translate great. But I'm glad they had it. I mean, think about it. The NBA Finals didn't even have a halftime show that was broadcasted on TV. So
Exactly.
This was something that made it unique and made it different and made it feel as big as football is in this country.
That's right. I mean, the insatiable appetite for football, because you think about NFL ratings have never been higher. College football, everybody, talks about NIL, oh, it's rooted college sports, blah, blah, blah. That's all. The college football ratings have never been higher. People are watching this stuff. College football playoff, I mean, that's been huge over here. I like what you said, especially about football being a uniting force in this. And I think that really now, with having the United Bowl in DC, all the details, it felt very, very, very big. And you love to see it. And then for all the Ravens fans that are out there, I mean, it's comforting to know that Chris Redman, who is the coach of the Kings, the Louisville Kings, he was on the Super Bowl 35 winning team. So that is something for, those in the region to take a little bit of comfort in on that one.
There's also a former Howard running back that was on the Louisville Kings as well.
That is true.
Yeah.
This
and
is
funny
true.
enough, because Howard University plays so many games at Audi Field every year,
Yeah.
that it felt like home court for him.
Exactly.
Good advantage.
It's a good advantage indeed. And, speaking of advantages, I think one of the big advantages this league has had has been Mike Rapoli. What do you make of him? Is the UFL, I know you kind of sort of answered this earlier on, but is the UFL, relative to some of the other sports in this whole sports ecosystem that dominate in the spring, is it on the right track? What do you make of this? Because, you think about Rapoli, the home openers had concerts, which I thought was genius in terms of this. What do you make of Rapoli's moves and really the UFL and kind of sort of the overall um ecosystem? Is it now finally sticking?
It is finally sticking, in my opinion. I don't think we're seeing the numbers to prove that yet. I do think we're on the right track. Here's why. Fox, they just acquired Roku the other day. They're busy just trying to establish itself among Wall Street, to say that they aren't a small company that's ready to get taken over. They are just as big as the other big dogs like Disney and Comcast and Amazon and Netflix. And they've been trying to prove that. Because of that, and they're also helping to basically control the Big Ten. Because of all these factors, they haven't had time to really pay attention to the operations of the UFL. ESPN, always fighting for survival. I mean, obviously, they are the behemoth that they are, but they're also fighting the Amazons and the Apples and the Netflixes of the world and trying to get bigger and stronger, which has included acquiring the NFL Network, acquiring MLB.TV rights. And acquiring even nascent leagues that would rather at some point maybe start their own streaming services or go to smaller streaming services, but ESPN eventually convinces them, hey, you should come join us and have some space in our ecosystem. And it's been working. They've just been trying their best to gobble up as many things as possible. Because of that, they don't have time to worry about the operations of the UFL. Redbird, they are a how do I say? Let me start that part again. Redbird, they are a capital investment firm that is focused on Paramount. They own Paramount right now. They're trying to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. They don't have time to worry about the UFL's operations. We thought The Rock was going to be a major factor. He was really good in the first year. Even did some cross promotion with the NFL. He's been a non-factor. He's probably somewhere filming movies. And so we needed somebody who was a face of the league. We needed somebody who was going to take this league, hold it by its hand, and teach it how to walk, teach it how to run, teach it how to ride a bike, teach it how to swim, and get its feet wet. And Mike Rapoli has done just that. Not only does it help that he has connections with his own company, Noble Bull, that he's one of Tom Brady's best friends, but he loves football. He really loves football. He loves the NFL product. He has great relations with the folks in the NFL. And he's one of the most amenable people that we have in sports. And that's what makes him such a transformative figure. I mean, let's look at what happened. I want to say it was in week 3 where the Louisville Kings, our champions, now they were playing a regular season game. I think it was even on Fox. And the game ended in overtime because the opposing team inflicted 2 defensive penalties. And fans on Twitter went irate. They were pissed. They said that there's no way a game can end because of defensive penalties. And within 1 week, the rules were changed. That is what an effective owner does. That is what an owner that really cares about their fans does. An owner that really wants the passion and the drive and the commitment to the sport to continue, that's what they do. That's how they act. It reminds me a lot of Dana White when he first started with the UFC, where if the fans had something to say, he was proactive and not reactive. And I think what I love, there's something that he said recently where he said he'd rather go into personal bankruptcy than to let this league die. That just shows you the kind of person that he is and
Yeah.
how much
Oh,
we allow him to continue to stay at the.
absolutely. Absolutely, Jesse. I think that, and you kind of sort of broke up a little bit, but I think our audience got the essence of the fact that really the energy that Rapoli brings, the point, and it's a point of difference, I think, between this league and the NFL. Because an upstart like the UFL can zig and zag, a bit. The NFL is kind of a bit of an elephant in this, a little bit slow to change, that sort of thing. You would not see Roger Goodell do the kind of things that Rapoli does. Now, granted, remember Goodell is just a commissioner. He's, remember all the teams in the NFL are owned by owners. And I think that the move for the UFL in the long term has been the MLS model, where kind of sort of owner operator sort of thing. You were mentioning some of the networks and that sort of thing. Remember that ESPN did a deal a few months ago with the CW Sports to have their games, the CW's games, stream on the ESPN platform. Do we see a possibility of the CW being a player in this league next year or in the future? Because remember, in 2028, Oklahoma City is going to be a team. There's going to be a 10th team. But with this deal with ESPN on the streaming, CW, are they a player in this? They're already into doing a lot of stuff with sports, especially at the college level. And a lot of their games have looked actually, I think, very good.
So the CW being a player in the UFL is something that's a possibility, and here's why. When ESPN acquired the NFL Network, within weeks, ESPN moved some of the UFL's games to the NFL Network. And a fun fact: a lot of NFL front office personnel, a lot of coaches, a lot of GMs, the network that they probably watch the most is the NFL Network. It's where they like to hear analysis about what's happening. They like to hear the latest moves of what's happening in the league. And obviously, it's a 24/7 network about what they do for a living. And so they love it. And it was great for the UFL players and coaches to be on there to get exposure. For, an NFL front office personnel could be doing some work in their office and maybe looks up real quick and sees a play that's impressive and cool to them and could possibly add that person to their team. And we've already seen after this week's United Bowl that there's been players that are already being signed by the NFL. And so if the NFL network can get permeated into the UFL this quickly, then I don't see why the CW couldn't as well. They're a network that's always looking for inventory. They're a network that doesn't really have much primetime programming that's really popular other than their sports programming. So if there's a Thursday night that ESPN isn't available, that Fox isn't available, that ABC isn't available, and that FS1 isn't available, I don't see why or how there wouldn't be a way to put those games on the CW. And if you want this sport to be a profitable sport at some point, you're going to need to start to gain some sports rights money. And the CW obviously can't afford the NFL, but being owned by Nexstar, which recently just acquired Tegna, they have enough money where they could find a couple dollars to pay for some UFL games and get 900,000 viewers tuning in on a random Thursday night, which is probably more than what they get on a normal night.
Oh, most certainly. Most certainly. And I think that especially as with the expansion, eventual expansion, you do need places to add more inventory to this. So this is something that I think among some of the other developments we're going to have to see for next year once the schedule comes out. And finally, Jesse, one of the things, thinking about the DC market, just kind of going back to the DC market a bit, um, you watch the United Bowl, you're familiar, with the team and that sort of thing. You haven't been to a game yet. We need to change that. You gotta let me know,
Yeah.
especially for next season of the show. But definitely looking at the DC market, the attendance has dropped, as you mentioned, a 30% drop. League has dropped 20% year to year in terms of the attendance. Ratings have been up though, which has been fantastic, especially on the ABC broadcasts. Has really been great. What would you like to see in the DC market in terms of goosing up those attendance numbers, so that we can really see a lot of those full stands? I mean, it wasn't that it was horrible, but what should Mike Rapoli and everybody do in that DC market? One of the things that I've pointed out is that DC this year, in terms of the marketing, they shared the same marketer as the Orlando team, the Orlando Storm. So the Orlando Storm and the Defenders share the same marketer, and I was not a fan of that very, very much. I think you need to have a local marketer, and especially to engage with all the teams. You and I know, Jesse, you've covered a lot of sports. Um, there is no shortage of choice out here, but in the
Oh yeah.
Baltimore, Washington region. So you
Yep.
have to have somebody that I think can really activate and really engage the Commanders, the Ravens, Orioles, Nats, Maryland. You and I, we graduated from Maryland.
Yeah.
So what do you see here for the DC Defenders in the future insofar as attendance and overall engagement for this?
And just to continue your point, I mean, this is a team where, as I said earlier, you never know who the star players are going to be year after year because some folks may age out, some folks may go to the NFL. We had Pep Hamilton 2 years ago. He left, and so.
Yeah, 2020, when the XFL came back, yeah, Pepe Hamilton, and he was the DC at one point over at Maryland. Then you had, of course, right now we've got Shannon Harris,
Yeah.
in this Reggie Barlow previous to him as well.
So the turnover happens really often in the UFL, and because of that, you're not going to have a face for these teams often, but you need folks to know their name. You need folks to know that the DC Defenders exist. They're a team. They play in the spring and they play football. And if you want to have a good time with your family or you want to have a good time with your friends, this is a place to be, to enjoy the weather after living the doldrums of winter, and to enjoy some good football. And the only way to do that is to engage with the community. And you have to engage with the community year round. You have to have somebody local who understands the market, who understands the region, who understands where people are. You have to go to these community events and go to these activations and have representatives there that represent the team and offer fans tickets throughout the year, through different contests, through different competitions that could even happen when the league isn't in session. When the Commanders and Ravens are playing, they should be at tailgates, promoting the team, talking about the team, making sure that folks become obsessed. Again, DC is a market that hasn't had a winning culture. That's something that the Defenders can sell. They can say, we are people that have been to the championship. We won a championship. We bring that winning culture to this area, and you should come join us. Whether that's through social media, whether that's through community events, whether that's through just having maybe a GM that is a GM, kind of like what these college teams have, that's a face of this area that might not have much going on, but when that face pops up and represents the team, it brings back memories. Somebody like a Doug Williams, who's a former Commanders player. Let's say he was the Defenders GM. Maybe he doesn't actually make the personnel moves, but you take him to various community events and have him represent the team and talk about the team and talk about why this team is important to the area. You eventually build an allegiance. You build a fan base. As you mentioned, DC is a market that has a lot going on. It's never dormant. And so it's going to be hard to really get people to have an allegiance without actually making the effort year round. The reason why St. Louis is so popular in the UFL right now is because it's a sports desert. Other than the Cardinals, nothing else exists, which is why attendance is so high. We have the total opposite problem here in DC. And so unless they actually get involved in community engagement year round, you're going to continue to see audience numbers dwindle, and you're going to see attendance dwindle, especially if, God forbid, the winning stops. And this is why I have a radical idea for the UFL. Please. I do genuinely believe that starting right after the Super Bowl is a bad idea. Have you ever gone out with your friends, and maybe because you had so much fun on Friday, you decided to go out on Saturday? And then maybe because you were really having fun on Friday and Saturday, you were like, all right, one more time. Let's go out on Sunday. Let's have a brunch. Let's enjoy ourselves. And it's been 3 action-packed days of just amazingness. Great camaraderie, great friendship, great vibes, right? May have even met a girlfriend. Are you going to go out on Monday too? No, you're tired. It's been a long weekend. There's not as much things going on Monday. It's a stressful time. You're hungover. You're tired. And it's the same with the UFL. Why am I going to pay attention to the UFL when I've just had an amazing AFC championship, an amazing NFC championship, an amazing playoff that takes place, and the Super Bowl? Even if the Super Bowl is a blowout, I have allegiance to these teams because these teams have been in existence for years. The players, don't have as much turnover. I just know what's happening. Um, I truly believe that if you start the season a little bit later into the spring, and end it closer to the middle of the summer, right before training camp starts for the NFL in July, I think you get way more allegiance and way more support. Just because when the season starts, you're competing with the NHL playoffs, you're competing with the NBA playoffs. You want people to miss football in order for them to come watch your
And
product. If
right,
they
and
just watched the most amazing product before, and then they watch a product that's not as high quality as the NFL, I don't know if people are going to pay attention as much.
because here's the thing, Jesse, and you touch on a lot of interesting points because there's a lot of debate as to whether to move up the calendar for the UFL because already the UFL over the past 3 years actually has started at the end of March. But so granted, you're in the kind of sort of that tail end of March Madness, that kind of sort of buzzsaw there. But there's been a lot of conversation. I see it all the time on Twitter and Reddit and everywhere else that a lot of people want the league to move up to start after the Super Bowl, just like the XFL did back in 2020 and 2023. So you are not a proponent of moving the calendar up
No,
for the league.
no,
Okay.
no. I actually think it should start even further. Maybe in May, and go all the way to July.
Cool.
You know.
Wow. So that would be actually the latest start because even when the USFL was a thing, the modern version, not the 80s version, but the modern version of it, that started in April. So you would start later.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
right now, if it wasn't for the World Cup, the only thing that would be on TV is the MLB and the WNBA. I think the UFL would be able to fill a gap with those two other sports that doesn't exist right now. I mean, right now, like as of like today and this year, it exists with the World Cup. But I think having a later start would help matters. I think trying to
Mm.
compete with the NHL playoffs and the NBA playoffs is such a bad idea. And I'll say personally, I didn't pay attention as much this year because there was the NFL and the NBA were really good this year. Sorry, the NHL and the NBA were actually really good this year. The playoffs were really good this year. If there's a year where it seems like there's one team that's dominant in the NHL and NBA playoffs, then I'm gonna watch some UFL. Otherwise, my attention is taken elsewhere.
Mm. Mm.
I think
Very.
I think competing with MLB regular season and WNBA regular season, where the season is still beginning while the UFL season is getting hotter and hotter, makes more sense to me.
Very, very interesting. I will love to see how our viewers and maybe Mike Rapoli, if he watches the show, uh takes all of this. It is a very interesting perspective you've got.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point in time where the UFL, because Mike Rapoli obviously is a really big horse racing enthusiast, so he tried to brand a Louisville Kings game around the Kentucky
That's
Derby.
right.
But again, how many people watched that compared to the Kentucky Derby? I mean, the Kentucky Derby gets like 20 million viewers a year. And I think the Kentucky Oaks even moved to prime time,
Yeah.
and that got a good chunk of viewership as well. I don't
Yeah.
know if people could put the connection together. And
Yeah.
so
It's
competing with
interesting.
something that's less competitive, um, than the Kentucky Derby, than the Preakness, than the Belmont Stakes, than the NFL and NHL. Sorry, the NBA and NHL playoffs. I think that makes more sense to me.
Mm. Very, very interesting stuff here, Jesse. Really appreciate this.
No problem.
I think that's definitely, no matter where you put this stuff on the calendar, you're always going to have competition from
For
much
sure.
more established leagues, and it's unavoidable. What was very interesting was that in terms of the regular season UFL versus regular season hockey, not playoff hockey, regular season hockey, the UFL's average actually beat the NHL. And remember, this that NHL, Disney's paying $400 million for the rights to this stuff, whereas Disney, along with Fox, Redbird, etc., Danny Garcia, Dwayne, they own the UFL.
Yeah.
So, I think from an ownership point of view, they're sitting pretty, on this. But, of course, Rome is not built in a day. This show was not built in a day. But Jesse, I'm afraid, sorry, in all of this, I'd love to continue to talk with you forever. But we have to get you to a game where we can really talk some more in
Yeah.
this. So Jesse Corregu, real quick, your content creation, where can people find you?
Yeah, follow me on all platforms at JMK TV Show, and also check out our content creation page on Instagram at Yo What's Good TV.
Okay. Well, I think that this has been very, very good TV, Jesse. So, Jesse Corregu, definitely sports media writer, content creator, contributor. Appreciate your time on this, our season finale.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so the final exam is done. So now it's time to do a final report card for the 2026 season of the UFL. And now, remember, I did an interim report card on this show about this league and where things stood at that point. So now we'll see whether things improved or whether things still need to be worked on. So, in terms of the quality of play, I graded that a B plus. Now I'm going to improve that grade a little bit. That gets an A from me. I mean, when I look at how fun some of these last few weeks of games were, and I think part of that has to do with the elimination of the divisions. I think that was a real good change there by Mike Rapoli. You looked at the Louisville game against the Aviators. That was a prime example of how entertaining in week 10 that was. It shouldn't have been as entertaining as it was, but it really was great. So I think that having games like that, the competitiveness, I mean, Tanner Brown, he's going to get a call from the NFL. Lots of places, they need a kicker. They need a kicker, and he is now the only kicker who has done two 60-plus yard field goals. Remember, those were 4 points, two 60-plus yard field goals in the same game. So that's going to be attractive to a lot of these NFL teams that need help at the kicker position. So we love to see it. Quality of the play. I think the extra week of training camp definitely helped. The offense has gelled very quickly, and people love to see scoring. And that, I believe, went up as well. So very, very great stuff there. That gets an A from me. Entertainment value, I had graded as an A in this. Now I'm going to add a plus to that. A plus. Really, 50 Cent, all the headline acts, some with varying degrees of quality. Still can't get over DJ Khaled's set in Orlando. It was just kind of sort of, I mentioned this was kind of sort of like Marshawn Lynch. I'm here so I don't get fined. I'm just here to get a check. So I don't know about all of that, but I do know that these headline performers really, really good. Got some people out of the openers, varying degrees of success afterward. But definitely that was really, really, really great. Close games really are good. Nobody wants to see blowouts at any level. I think that the competitiveness of these games keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's really good for the television audience. Value for the money. I think this was demonstrated in a lot of these games, especially for the United Bowl. As I said, the activations, the giveaways, concert with 50 Cent, the having a band out there, all the little things really did help. The shirts, everything. Brilliant. This is how this stuff should be. You're getting more for your money than you would at the NFL. You really, really are. So again, I'm very, very satisfied with what I saw with this. When you get the basics right, Mike Rapoli understands this. When you get the basics right, everything else follows. It's why I wasn't a fan of the modern USFL when that was a fake. With the exception of gameplay, they got none of the basics right. Continental Football League, they're getting nothing right. So really, I'd rather be in the position of the UFL right now in this. Intangibles and optics. I keep saying this: intangibles matter, optics matter, because you really want to drive casual fans into this league. I've said this: 2.2 million was the average for NFL preseason games in terms of the ratings. So the closer you get to that, and we've had a lot of games in this league that got over 1 million. So the intangibles and optics matter. I had a B- in the interim progress report. I'm going to slightly upgrade that. That's going to be a B for me. Birmingham after Gucci Mane, that was a disaster in terms of the attendance. I don't know about this. Lowest retention of anybody in this. I don't know. That's not a good market, guys. It seems to me that it's almost reminds me of my last job. Some of the producers that I worked with, everything had to be perfect in order for stuff to work, in order for the shows to work. If everything was perfect, for some of the producers that I worked with, not everybody, I worked with a lot of great producers at my last job. But for a few of the producers that I worked with in the 11 years that I was at my last job, like everything, if everything was perfect, things were great. It was like riding a jet ski. If one thing was not perfect, it was like the Titanic. So I don't know. Having your strongest markets, DC and St. Louis, that's a cause of concern still for me in terms of this. 30% drops in some of this, not particularly great. I mean, we could talk about economy, we could talk about some of these other things. We've mentioned these stuff on the show, but definitely that stuff has to be really, really worked on. I mean, the good thing is that what saves this is that there has been an increase in the ratings. You're beating hockey in the regular season. Regular season average to regular season average. You're beating hockey in the ratings. And NHL, that's much more established. And if I were Disney, I would renegotiate the deal with the NHL. You're paying $400 million, $400 million for the rights to hockey. With the UFL, I have an ownership stake. Disney has an ownership stake. It's football, so that's a higher upside sport than the hockey, which remains kind of sort of niche. Louisville, bona fide hit. So you replicate that in some of these other places, it is great. So B on that. Overall grade for the league this year, I would give a B plus. B plus. We got to work on some year-round marketing. Year-round marketing. I want to see college students involved. You know, you have to engage college students in this. I'd like to see more of that. I really would. But definitely Mike Rapoli, he brings the juice. He brings the energy. And this is the kind of stuff where I think when you look at his business acumen, when you look at all these exits that he made in terms of vitamin water, body armor, that sort of thing, Noble, when you look at that stuff, this has the potential of really being a great stuff that will capture the zeitgeist of the casual fans. I've said this in past shows. I think that this league is where the WNBA used to be before Caitlin came into the picture. So I think that this is going to happen faster. The cultural zeitgeist of the UFL is going to happen faster than what it's been for the WNBA. But really, I think we are well on the way. This UFL is well on the way, and I think we love to see it. John Lewis of John Lewis Sports joins us on the season finale of Spring Football Has Sprung. John, great to have you back on our program. I mean, you have been a very popular guest on the show. It's amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. You need better guests if that's the case. Come on.
Oh boy, that is quite something right there, John. I mean, No, but in all seriousness, though, we really appreciate having the
Sure.
opportunity to talk with you about this league and everything else. And you've got yourself a Kings jersey, a sweatshirt, I should say. But what was your reaction to the win of the Kings? Congratulations on that.
It's still hard to wrap my head around. I just know when the 0-3 start happened, I said, okay, if they can maybe finish 500, that's a good season for, a first year team. Then when they started to have that little win streak, I was like, man, if they could like somehow back into the playoffs, that might be pretty cool. Then they get in the playoffs and like, well, they're probably going to lose at St. Louis, but man, they got to the playoffs and then they beat St. Louis. And I'm like, I don't know that there's no way they beat DC at DC. So I just kept doubting and kept doubting and kept doubting. It was incredible. I know that was I think if Jordan Ta'amu had stayed healthy, you and I are having a different conversation. Your DC Defenders, I think, would be hoisting that trophy once more over somebody. I'm not necessarily Louisville, but it would have been somebody. It'd been a different story. But it's been incredible. The vibe around this city with the Kings. Even after the 0-3 start, people were still showing up for the games. It was just, it was mind blowing to me that not only did we get a UFL team here, then we win the championship the first year. It was crazy.
I mean, and you called it, John, when the league decided that Louisville should have a team, and you had it in one of your videos on your channel, John Lewis Sports, about the case for Louisville. And you said that the excitement has been great. You even saw the bridge lit up for Louisville. So that's been amazing. What does this win mean now for the city insofar as a year two? Could we see more growth out of this? We're seeing 6,000 season tickets being accounted for already. You saw one of the articles there. A lot of sponsors now in this. What do you see, John, in this? Would the Lynn family be involved? Do you see that happening? Maybe take an ownership stake at some point if this was to be a thing, kind of like the MLS owner-operator model type situation. What do you see in that market?
I think you touched on some really good points. Number one, there will be growth here, I think, with fans. Most of these games, you would have 9, 10, 11,000 people. I thought it might be a hardcore bunch of us, just football sickos showing up for this thing, but it really turned into something because Lynn Family Stadium is such a good atmosphere. It's a great atmosphere for Lou City, which is the USL team, good atmosphere for Racing Louisville, which is the NWSL team that are both owned by the, by the owners of Lynn Family Stadium. And you talked about that. I really think that once franchising happens, if it does happen in the UFL, that I think what I believe the company is called Soccer Holdings. They might expand some of their holdings a little bit because this has been a success from the jump. I mean, it really has. Even again, I think it speaks to, as I said, a 0-3 start and people still show up for these games. It meant a lot to this community. It meant a lot to the community because Chris Redmond, who I think a lot of people might have thought was a gimmick hire, and he didn't have any head coaching experience, no real coaching experience. He was a former U of L quarterback. He was a high school legend here in Louisville. His father's a high school coaching legend. The Redmond name means a lot here, and I think it just built on top of that where he showed his coaching chops. He blew up the team after their first win, and we're all like, "What are you doing?" And it really just it turned into a championship. So I think there will be growth. I think you're starting to see fans already buy in again, as you said, the season tickets. And I think ownership could happen here if franchising happens.
Well, let's certainly hope for that. There was a segment that I did that I think Louisville is ready for outside investment. I really, really do, on the back of the energy that has been demonstrated clearly. None of the games in Louisville dipped below 10,000 in attendance. So I think it's remarkable, even the whole controversy about the whole overtime, that sort of thing. Some of us kind of sort of thought that, the buy-in would not be great after that.
Right.
But look at this stuff now. And Chris Redmond, rookie coach. There was the worry, as you said, John, about rookie coaches in this league, but he made the most of it. And I do have to say, for our audience out there, especially in the Baltimore, Washington area, you know that Chris Redmond, he was on the Super Bowl 35 winning team. So
That's
maybe
right.
for the Baltimore Washington fans who are fans of the Defenders, maybe there's a little bit of comfort in that. And I'm also comforted by the fact, John, that the UFL has completed a third season. It's the first
Yeah.
non-NFL domestic league to do so since the 80s USFL. I mean, what do you think of that achievement for the league at this point?
I think it might have been on shaky ground last year, but I think the injection of Mike Rapoli into this thing, you and I have talked about this before, Eugene. I always thought that the UFL and USFL and XFL had good football minds in the front office. They needed someone like Mike Rapoli who could do all the other things, all the marketing things, the business side of things. And I think, to me, spring football is in the best position it's been in since, as you mentioned, the 1980s USFL. There were a lot of very rich owners who were willing to spend a lot of money then, and unfortunately that became a problem. But I think financially, and that's what has sunk a lot of spring leagues. You and I have seen them over the years. It's
Yes.
why do they all fail? They all fail because of money. And
Right.
I think the UFL is in the best position because you already had the backing of Fox and Disney. Now you've got Mike Rapoli, a billionaire. You've got the Qatar Sovereign Fund. You've got Redbird Capital. This thing is well financed, and and I think one big thing of this is you saw Columbus do well, you saw Louisville do well, even Orlando. I think
Yes.
they probably wanted more people there, but they did well. So you had 3 new markets who proved this. There's a proof of concept now that I think could, when you start to see expansion, when you start to, as we were saying, you start to see franchising and
Yeah.
ownership, there's something to sell now.
Big time. Big time. And I think that if I was talking with a few people about this, like with agents now at this point, we think about some of these agents and talk about some of like college football, D2 schools, especially, that sort of thing, maybe some of the fringe players in D1. And they're probably not sure whether or not the league was going to last. I think last year, John, as you kind of sort of stated, it seemed to be a little touch and go, to be honest with you.
Yep.
The vibes were kind of off. There was the whole stuff about the CBA, that sort of thing,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think that I agree, John. This is probably the best for spring football since the 80s USFL. If we think about kind of sort of the, all these up, fits and starts
Yeah.
for these leagues, which, as you said, you and I have seen this. You've been reporting on all of this, 30 years in broadcasting. So I mean, we've seen a lot throughout this time. And now with this modern era of spring football, since you think about the AAF, people are like, oh, we're not sure about this. Now I think people are sure because you've got the backing, as you said, and everything else. And, of course, let's not forget The Rock and Danny Garcia. They've kind of, I think, faded into the background a little more. Now this is Mike Rapoli's show.
Yep.
A lot of people were ready to throw Mike Rapoli, the baby out with the bathwater initially when he made all these changes, 4-point field goal, the bedside manner and everything else. So the first thing, speaking of Rapoli, one of the things that he has to tackle, John, I see 2 things in this offseason. The first, actually 3 things. The first is attendance. Attendance dropped 20%. Maybe there's argument to be made. I've said this on the show, about economic conditions or whatever.
Yep.
But I think the other things here, Birmingham, the future there. He made the quote, 80% chance of franchises, all these teams sticking around next year. And I think when we see what's happening in Birmingham, 18,000, and then after that, it kind of sort of fell off a cliff, their lowest retention, that's pretty tough. And then the CBA, this is going to be the first negotiation under Rapoli's ownership. What do you think about these things, John, in terms of what Rapoli has to face in this offseason, especially as it pertains to the CBA and Birmingham?
Well, I would say, when I heard that quote of 80% chance that you retain all 8 franchises, if I'm going to bet on the 20%, I think Birmingham's going to have to make another case if they want to keep the UFL there. I think Houston's toast. I don't know that Houston can be saved. I think the Houston fans have been burnt so many times. The change of venue didn't help. The poor performance didn't help. I just
Ooh,
think it might be beyond saving, and some of
wow.
the lowest attendance that we've seen. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, you're right about the CBA. I think there's going to be some things that, Mike Rapoli said before the season. He didn't want to see, just a bunch of guys out here trying to get a paycheck to play football. I think he wanted to walk that one back just a little bit because, I think that was kind of a strike at some of the older players. But listen, this league needed some older players. This league needed the guys like Luis Perez to come, to get traded to St. Louis and take them to the playoffs. It needs guys like that. But this is also a showcase for the younger players. There's no question. So I will be interested to see, what the union presents and how much Rapoli will push back, if he pushes back a lot at all. He's tasted success, but he also realizes, as he said, this was an internship for him after 1 year. And he said, we need to focus on what works, focus on what doesn't work, and what we can do better. And when I hear someone like that who doesn't come in and say, like, everything was great and try to gaslight everybody into thinking that this is the next NFL, I don't think that's Mike Rapoli. And that was nice to hear that he understands there are things to work on, things that he's addressed throughout the year. I mean, the UFL shop, Birmingham attendance, there have been all kinds of things. He's open about that. And I think that's great.
It is quite refreshing. It
Yeah.
is quite refreshing. And I met him at the wharf last week when they were doing the whole party leading up to the United Bowl, and he's just as energetic in person as he is on the Twitter sphere. So I think a lot of interesting stuff, John, going into this offseason. It's stuff that I know for a fact that you and I will certainly be talking about. And, speaking of one last thing I want to look at in this, especially as it pertains to Mike Rapoli, the last time you were on our show, I did a report card. I did an interim progress report on the league. And now that we're at the end, I wanted to give you some grades, and this will kind of sort of lead to our last question here. I initially graded the quality of the play in the interim progress reports a B plus. Now I give it an A. And then I look at the entertainment value. I said A on the interim progress report. Now I give this stuff an A plus. And I then looked at the intangibles and the optics. I've always said on the show that the intangibles and optics matter. B minus initially in the interim, I upgraded that to a B. I think that there's some work to be done with some of the marketing aspects. You need to involve the college students, that sort of thing. I graded that slightly higher, a B on there. But then I give overall grade this year for the league, I give that a B plus. I think there's still some work to do. I still like to see some year-round marketing because, as the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. What do you think of my evaluation of the league? And if there's any advice that you'd like to give to Mike Rapoli if he watches this show, I hope that he does. But what advice would you like to give him?
Well, first of all, I don't know if I had told you on this show. I did give Mike Rapoli advice after I was at the Orlando game where they lost in overtime, and I yelled at him and I said, "Please change this rule," and he did. So he took my advice on that. I'm sure it was me.
What's this going?
But no, I think what you graded, I think absolutely. If there's one thing that I would say about the quality of play, I would have liked to have seen a little bit of more consistent quarterback play. But I think you get that when you have, let's hope that they don't blow up the rosters again. That's my advice to Mike Rapoli. There's been some talk, now I haven't heard him say this, but there has been some talk about they might try it again where you almost like a fantasy football thing where you can protect a core bunch of players, then everyone goes out into the draft pool. I don't think that's a good idea. I think one reason being that you're not going to have good play because it's almost like you're doing 8 expansion teams again. I think we saw some of that. Remember about week 3 or week 4, how the offenses and defenses just started to go this way.
Yes.
Because these were basically preseason games for these guys.
That's right.
So that's why
we're gelling.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So what I'd like to see is if I had one big piece of advice for Rapoli, keep these rosters together. Yeah, I mean, sure, you've got to make cuts. You've got to, so many players are already. We've just seen a glut of players getting signed by NFL
Yeah.
teams. Some of those may be back. They may be, camp bodies. They may be get cut in the preseason, and that's fine. But I still think, like, don't bring them back into some supplemental pool. Like, really, let's make these players part of the identity of these teams. We saw that with Chandler Rogers here in Louisville.
Yeah.
I mean, he steps up. This guy, I mean, he could run for governor right now. I mean, it's
Exactly.
like, so, and some of these, Cam Gill on defense, like these are people that we're starting to see, especially in these markets like Louisville, which has never had a team. We start to recognize these guys and put them together as like faces of the franchise. So I would hope that would be something that Mike Repole would do. But I like your grading system because I think they passed with flying colors this year. As we said, UFL, spring football, it's in great shape.
I think just to use the title of our program, spring football truly has sprung this year. It really, really has, John. I mean, this really has been a lot of fun. I think Taylor Brown is going to stick on the roster. He got signed, with the Saints.
Yep.
So I think he has a very good shot of sticking. He was the only player to have 2 60-plus yard field goals in the same game of any professional team.
Correct.
So let's see what happens there. I'm excited about Louisville, John. I have been very, very, very bullish on this. That market really, really big. I hope you guys enjoy the parade, whatever that is. And I look forward, John, to talking with you more next season, of course, provided that the league comes back, which I think in all indications, it seems like it is. But definitely, John, I do look forward to continuing these conversations and hopefully continue with this program. So, John Lewis, John Lewis Sports, appreciate your time this season on Spring Football Has Sprung.
I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the show. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated. John Lewis of John Lewis Sports. Folks, if I think about the entire spring football ecosystem over these past few years, I think that this year of the UFL was really the best since the 2020 iteration of the XFL. I don't think you're going to entirely recapture the magic that was the 2020 XFL, but this came pretty damn close. And it's really credit to Repole and everybody for really recapturing much of the juice that was so desperately needed. It looked touch and go for a second there, especially last year, but really, I think he has got the energy back that is really was so desperately needed. And I think talking with a lot of people on Metro the day of the United Bowl, I was like, it's one thing talking, it's kind of like almost the difference between talking to people on Zoom versus talking to people in person. In person's always way better. And it was the same thing with this, talking to people on the train and hearing people's ideas for the league. The common denominator is that people want this league to work. People feel close. People feel connected to this, and they want to build this up. People want to feel like they're part of something, right? And that's what this is. And I think that a few things in this off season, I think that definitely you're going to have to look at attendance. Attendance was down 20%. Can't control what goes on with the economy or whatever, but the league can control things that it can control. And I think the big thing has been got to engage college students. Marketing in 101. You got to get the vouchers, get everything going with that group of folks, and you're going to pack these stadiums. I made a video a while back where I was like, I didn't see any tents for the UFL over at University of Maryland. And remember, the DC market is rife with the Baltimore-Washington region is rife with colleges. Much of the teams in this league are rife with a lot of colleges. So they need to engage that sector much more effectively than what I've seen. They really, really do. I think college students are the future of this league. Of course, yes, young children as well. It was nice to see a lot of kids out at the United Bowl. When they see how fun an experience like this is, you know, they will buy in. And that's how you create a customer. That's how you, and, with college students especially, it's like their friends, they get a group of friends, their friends will tell their friends will tell their other friends, and so on and so forth. So definitely, I want to see that. I want to see year-round marketing. Remember, there's a saying, out of sight, out of mind. So we need to see year-round marketing, not just in the run-up to this, not just through emails and things of that nature. There's just, in my view, there's just too much right now preaching to the choir. You have, even when I go to some of these events, you notice a lot of the same people. I will say that the stuff that was done in DC for the United Bowl, um, that attracted a few more casuals, I think. So that was really good. But a lot of these stuff, you kind of start to see the same people. There has to be a year-round effort in terms of really keeping the defenders or any team in this league at the forefront. So that's really the big thing. One of the big things. The second thing is Birmingham's future. Um, it's a huge question mark. I think that the ship has started to sail in terms of Birmingham in this league. Remember, 80%. Rapoli said to ESPN, 80% chance that all 8 teams are going to be retained next year. If this was 100%, that all of the teams are going to be retained next year, he would be screaming from the rooftops on that one. I'll put LFG at the end of the tweet. So the fact that he did it, I think, speaks volumes as to where I think the direction is going when it comes to Birmingham. And then the CBA. The CBA, that is going to be, I think, that's one that I think everybody's going to keep their eyes on. This is the first under Rapoli's ownership. I like to see maybe an MLS model where it's like you pay more, like the designated player model, where it's like, and maybe the local sponsors can chip in on that, where it's like you pay a few people a little more than what the average is. Now, the average between, of the UFL's salary relative to the CFL salary on the low end of the scale, the gap is not that much, but you want to start to close the gap a little more in this, because the players that otherwise would play in Canada, they will be much more inclined to stay at home. Imagine if Bryce Perkins stayed home. I think that would have been really, really incredible. So I will be very interested to see what it is that is done with that CBA. You hope that those negotiations will go very, very well in that regard. And now, in looking at each market, I'm going to actually extend some letter grades to each of these markets and really look and see what has to be done market by market. So hopefully the league are paying attention to this show here. Maybe this will guide some of the decisions there in Arlington in the boardroom. Birmingham, D- for all of the reasons I stated. The only reason that it doesn't get an F is that it's not part of the Continental Football League. So there's that right there. Columbus, B, great market. I like it as I like the stocks that I own. Buy and hold. It is something where I think with the Michigan Panthers, hopefully coming back, I don't think that that's going to happen in 2028. I don't, especially with the delays in the construction. But definitely, once that is brought back, boy, that is going to be a real TV play. I think the attendance play is going to be superb. They only have solid attendance, Columbus. Then add Michigan to the mix. That is going to be a really great stuff. I like Todd Haley in this. OC Todd Haley. I'd probably move off of Ted Ginn Jr., to be honest with you. He looks like a lost puppy out there. But definitely Columbus, that was a really great market for the league. A good solid stuff there. Dallas B minus. I think it's time to move back to Choctaw. Much more convenient. I think you're going to raise the attendance there. New Heisel is great. I like him. I would keep him, but definitely I think Choctaw may be the move going forward. Toyota Stadium, better optics maybe, especially for the crowds that Dallas did manage to get. But I think that by and large, a lot of the feedback is that the move to Frisco was just not really all that convenient. So I think having stuff in a centralized location, there's a lot to be said for that. So Dallas, I give that market a B minus there. DC, B plus. Market decline, well, not so much market decline. I mean, attendance decline. It's a bit of a concern. I think there were a few self-inflicted wounds in that. I would move off of much of the noon games. I'm not a fan really of too many noon games in that market. DC is a brunch market. DC is all about brunch. You're not going to get a lot of that captive audience, especially that young audience out at noon. Way too many noon games. The former DC Greg Williams agreed with me on that one on Twitter. And you need to get a local marketer. Can't share the same marketer as the one in Orlando. So, Mike, if you see this, get somebody who is local, who can connect with a lot of teams. There's no shortage of teams out here in the DMV. There's a lot of great local stuff, though. Great local sponsorships. I do like, seeing that Maryland Live was in there. So that was very good. But, again, DC and St. Louis, they're two strongest markets in the league, and they declined. And those are your flagships. It's just like the automakers. It's like cars, each manufacturer has a flagship. You treat your flagships a little better than your others. So I would really like to see some engagement there. Engagement at UMD. Shannon Harris is great. I keep him. Tom is great. Real great ambassador for the league. I've had the opportunity to talk with him at one of the league events. Real stand-up guy. Really, really great. Really love to see him continue to do well, and hopefully he's healthy so that there is another run there. Houston, C+. Very tough. I think that they need stability. Stability is the name of the game. Jerked around too many times. I think someone has earned himself another year on the back of some of the growth that we saw in some of the games. The tennis quarterback situation's a mess. Got to figure that out. But that's a market that I think deserves a little more resources. I think maybe another year before maybe entertaining the thought of having Austin, having Austin, Texas in there. So we'll see about that. Louisville, really, really great market. A plus, actually. As I've said, model student, great energy. They care. They care. They give a hoot about that team. Chris Redmond, fantastic. What he did as a rookie coach, very, very impressive. Hometown guy, kind of sort of your hometown hero, that sort of thing. Really, really great. There's an argument to be made now, I think, that non-NFL markets, that is really looking good. I think that may be the move long term for a league like this, is to do this stuff in the non-NFL markets. It's just a great market. Fantastic. So A plus on that. Lynn Family Stadium, those shots, I still cannot get over the shots during the opening game. That just had me at hello. I cannot wait to go there. Orlando, A. Great stuff. They filled one side of Daytona on short notice. Really good stuff. I like the potential. I like Anthony Beck. Real good ambassador for the league. You get those college students, you're golden. St. Louis, B plus. Again, just like DC, your DC St. Louis crowd jewels of the league. You got to treat them a little better. There's an argument to be made that St. Louis has been taken for granted a lot in this. But Energizer Park, I know people will say, oh, They don't want it, blah, 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 that sort of thing. But again, I mentioned this on one of the last shows. I'm like, look, the money talks. Money talks. Ripoli's got plenty of it. And the deal for the Dome expires this year. So I don't know. It's going to depend on who has the better deal and what Mike wants to do with this. I think that now, as long as I've said this, St. Louis, you lose half of your number and you still be number one in attendance. And of course, the Dome, you have ways to grow always. But I don't know. Energizer, I still will not rule out. Rapoli's got a ton of money. He really does. So I mean, I would not, really be so ready to dismiss Energizer Park in terms of optics of that. But I think that they'll get a deal with the Dome ultimately. But St. Louis has been, huge diehards, huge diehards. The whole F stand Kroenke bit maybe fading in that market. But St. Louis, I think there's an argument to be made that but for St. Louis, there's no league. Casual fans, again, this league needs casual fans. You need casual fans in this league. Diehards are great. Diehards, I think you'll survive, certainly. But I think to thrive, and I think that the league is getting close to thriving now, especially on the back of completing 3 seasons, that you will have a good chance at this point of thriving when you get those casual fans into the door. So that is what one of the many things that we will be watching for this off season. And I do hope that you have enjoyed the first season of Spring Football Has Sprung. Really want to take the time to thank everybody. Thank the Common Sense Entertainment team here for their continued work and support on this. A huge thanks to everybody for watching this show. I mean, this has been, for me, a lot of fun. This is probably the most fun I've had doing any show here on this channel of Common Sense Entertainment. So we are going to hopefully continue to do this show, provided that there is a league to cover next season with the UFL. And hopefully we'll continue the conversations on social media. Do keep up with us on all of our socials. And I hope that you will keep it locked here, youtube.com/the CSE channel. Like, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. And until we see you next year, hopefully, for this show, please, 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 don't fumble in the end zone.